Hey, I'm glad you chose this story tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in, lower your screen brightness, and let your breathing slow down. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I always like knowing who's awake with me in the quiet hours. Now, let's step into tonight's stories. I'm posting this because I don't know who else to tell. If you've ever lived in the countryside, maybe you'll understand how quiet it can get. So quiet that even your own thoughts feel intrusive. 3 years ago, I moved back to my hometown in Yamagata after my mother passed away. It's a small village pressed between cedar forests and rice fields, the kind of place where the train comes once every hour and the station attendant retired 10 years ago. Most of the houses are empty now. Their owners either died or moved to Sendai. Our village shrine sits halfway up the mountain, past a long flight of stone steps that no one repairs anymore. When I was a child, we had summer festivals there, lanterns, shaved ice, kagura dances. But those stopped after the landslide 15 years ago. Officially, it was because of safety concerns. Unofficially, people said the mountain had been disturbed. Behind the shrine is a narrow path leading deeper into the trees. My grandmother used to tell me never to go past the torii at the back. "That's where she waits," she'd say, half joking, half serious. I assumed she meant some local yokai meant to scare children. After moving back, I started hiking to clear my head. The forest air helped with the grief. One evening in late autumn, I found myself climbing the shrine steps without really deciding to. The building looked smaller than I remembered. The offertory box was rotting. Someone had tied fresh Shimenawa rope around the sacred tree, though. That struck me as strange. There are barely 30 people left in the village, and most are too old to climb. The sun was already dipping behind the ridge when I noticed it. A narrow red torii behind the main shrine. I didn't remember it being that bright. The paint looked new. I told myself someone from the next town must be maintaining it. I walked through. The air felt colder immediately, though it was only a few steps. The path beyond was thinner than I remembered, swallowed by bamboo grass. About 20 meters in, I saw a small wooden structure, more like a shed than a shrine. Its door was slightly open. I should have turned back then. Instead, I convinced myself I was just being nostalgic. Inside was a mirror. Not a shrine mirror like the Yada no Kagami replicas you see in proper shrines. This was a tall, modern standing mirror, the kind you'd find in an apartment. It leaned against the back wall. The surface was spotted with age, but clear enough to reflect me. Tied around its frame were dozens of faded omamori charms. I don't know why, but seeing that made my stomach tighten. There was a small wooden plaque nailed above it. The characters were old-fashioned, but I could read them. "Do not look for long." I laughed out loud. It sounded too loud in the cramped space. Of course I looked. At first, it was just my reflection. Unshaven, tired, 34 and back where I started. The forest behind me shifted slightly in the breeze. I leaned closer, noticing how the glass distorted the edges of my face. Then I realized something was wrong. The trees in the reflection weren't moving. I held my breath. Outside the shed, I could hear the wind clearly. Leaves rustling, bamboo clacking. But in the mirror, the forest stood completely still. I told myself it was just the angle. Then I blinked. In the reflection, I didn't. It was subtle. A delay, maybe half a second. But it was enough. My heart started pounding. I stepped back from the mirror. The reflection stayed where it was, still staring forward, still too close to the glass. I stumbled against the doorframe, and in that moment, the reflected version of me smiled. Not a wide grin, just a small, knowing curve of the lips. The kind you give when you recognize someone. I don't remember running down the mountain, but I must have. When I reached my house, it was already dark. I locked every door and window, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. That night, I dreamed of the mirror. In the dream, I was standing inside it, looking out. The shed was on the other side. I could see myself entering, cautious and curious. The other me, the real me, stepped closer. I tried to warn him not to, but when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. Instead, he smiled. I woke up gasping. The room felt unfamiliar for a few seconds, like I was a guest in my own home. The next morning, I checked my phone. There was a photo in my camera roll I didn't remember taking. It was a picture of the inside of the shed, of the mirror. But the angle was wrong. It was taken from inside, facing the doorway. A man stood there, half turned as if about to leave. He looked exactly like me, except he was smiling. I told myself I must have taken it accidentally. Some kind of stress-induced sleepwalking. I deleted the photo and tried to move on. But small things began to feel misplaced. My futon would be folded differently than I remembered. The kettle would be warm when I hadn't used it. Once, I found mud near the genkan, the reddish kind from the shrine path. I haven't gone back to the mountain. I tried asking one of the older villagers about the back shrine. Mrs. Takahashi frowned when I mentioned it. That place, she said. We sealed it years ago. Sealed what? She hesitated. After the landslide, they found a body. A young man from the village. He'd gone missing. They said he must have fallen. Her eyes drifted past me, but some of us saw him after. I didn't ask her to explain. 2 nights ago, I dreamed again of the mirror. Only this time, I wasn't inside it. I was standing outside the shed, watching someone walk down the mountain path. He moved like me. Same jacket. Same uneven stride from the ankle I sprained in college. He didn't look back. Yesterday, my neighbor stopped me while I was taking out the trash. "You're feeling better?" he asked. "Better?" He nodded. "You seemed different last week. Not very talkative. But yesterday you greeted me like usual." I hadn't left the house yesterday. Tonight, as I write this, I'm sitting in my room with the door locked. The house is silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. A few minutes ago, I heard the faint crunch of gravel outside. Slow footsteps approaching the entrance. They stopped at the genkan. I'm trying to tell myself it's just a stray cat. Or the wind shifting stones. But I can hear breathing. Soft. Patient. Like someone waiting for me to open the door. The worst part isn't the fear. It's the feeling that if I don't answer, he'll just use his key. The last train doesn't stop at Kasaragi Station anymore. Officially, it's still marked on the line map. A small white between 2 larger towns in Gunma. But after 10:48 p.m., every train passes through without opening its doors. I didn't know that the first time I got off there. I work irregular shifts at a printing company, and that night I missed my usual stop because I fell asleep. When I woke, the carriage was almost empty. The overhead lights flickered faintly as the automated voice announced Kasaragi. The doors slid open. No one else moved. I stepped out onto the platform. The train left immediately. It was colder than it should have been for early October. The platform lights cast a weak yellow glow over cracked tiles and a wooden bench that looked older than the station itself. There were no vending machines, no ticket gate, just a narrow stairway leading down to a small road. I checked my phone. No signal. That didn't worry me at first. Rural stations often have poor reception. What bothered me was the timetable. It listed the next train at 5:12 a.m. I considered walking, but the road beyond the station dissolved into darkness between thick lines of trees. I didn't remember seeing any houses from the train, so I waited. The silence felt layered, not peaceful, more like something pressed against my ears. Even the insects seemed absent. After a while, I noticed a small office near the far end of the platform. Its sliding window was slightly open. Inside, an old station master's desk sat beneath a wall clock. The clock was running. 10:48. Its second hand moved steadily. I checked my phone again. 11:26 p.m. I stared at the clock, waiting for it to change. It didn't. The second hand kept moving, but the minute hand stayed fixed. A prickle of unease crept up my spine. I stepped back onto the platform. That's when I saw someone sitting on the bench. I'm certain it had been empty before. The figure was a woman in a pale coat, her hair long and dark, falling forward to hide her face. She sat perfectly upright, hands folded in her lap. I told myself she must have been there all along. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you know when the next train comes?"
She didn't respond.
The air felt heavier as I approached. When I was a few steps away, she tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something far away. Then she stood. She was taller than I expected. Without looking at me, she began walking toward the end of the platform, where a narrow maintenance path disappeared into the trees. I hesitated only a moment before following. I didn't want to be alone. The path was uneven, scattered with gravel and fallen leaves. The woman moved without hesitation, her pace steady but unhurried. "Is there another station nearby?" I asked. She didn't turn around. The trees grew denser. The platform lights faded behind us. After a few minutes, I realized something was wrong. The sound of our footsteps was out of sync. Mine crunched against gravel. Hers did not. I slowed. Her pace didn't change. I stopped completely. She continued walking. The distance between us widened, though I hadn't seen her accelerate. Panic fluttered in my chest. "Wait," I called. She stopped. Very slowly, she turned her head. Her hair shifted just enough for me to glimpse part of her face. There was nothing there. Not emptiness, exactly. More like a smooth, pale surface where features should have been, blurred and indistinct, as if my eyes refused to focus. I stumbled backward. When I blinked, she was closer, much closer, standing only a few steps away. I hadn't seen her move. The forest around us felt impossibly silent. She raised one hand and pointed behind me. I turned instinctively. The station platform stood where the trees had been, fully lit, as if it had never been abandoned. A train waited with its doors open. Relief washed over me. I looked back at the woman to thank her. She was gone. I hurried toward the platform. The train looked older than the one I'd arrived on. Its windows were dark, reflecting only the station lights. I boarded. The doors closed immediately. Inside, every seat was occupied. Passengers sat perfectly upright, facing forward. Men in business suits, elderly couples, a schoolgirl with a Randasira backpack. None of them moved. Their faces were angled slightly downward, as if asleep. I took the nearest empty seat. The train began to move. There was no announcement of the next stop. I tried checking my phone again. Still no signal. But the time now read 10:48 p.m. I felt my pulse quicken. That wasn't possible. I'd been waiting for over an hour. Across from me, the schoolgirl slowly lifted her head. Her eyes met mine. They were unfocused, cloudy, like old glass. Her lips parted slightly. "You shouldn't have followed her," she said. Her voice sounded distant, like it was traveling through water. The overhead lights flickered. When they steadied, every passenger was looking at me, not turning their heads, just their eyes. All at once, the train began to slow. Through the window, I saw a familiar sign pass by. Kisaragi Station. The doors opened. The platform was empty. The clock in the station office read 10:48. The second hand moved. The minute hand did not. I stayed seated. No one else got off. The doors remained open longer than they should have. Finally, slowly, the other passengers began to rise. In perfect unison, they stepped into the aisle and turned toward me. I don't remember leaving the train. I only know that I woke up at my usual stop just before midnight, the carriage brightly lit and nearly full. The conductor was announcing the station name as if nothing unusual had happened. I ran off the train and checked the line map on the platform wall. There is no Kisaragi station listed between those two towns. I told myself I'd imagined it. Until yesterday, on my commute home, the train slowed unexpectedly between stations. Outside the window, just for a moment, I saw a small platform lit in weak yellow light. A wooden bench, an empty office, and a timetable that read, "Next departure, 10:48 p.m. As the train began moving again, I caught my reflection in the glass. For a split second, my face looked blurred, featureless, as if something had started to smooth it away. The village of Hashikawa holds a lantern festival every August, even though there are barely 50 residents left. I hadn't been back in 12 years. My aunt asked me to help this summer because there weren't enough young people to carry the Mikashi. I work remotely now, so I told myself it would be good to get out of Tokyo. Good to breathe mountain air again. Hashikawa sits in a valley surrounded by dense cedar forest. There's only one road in and out. When fog settles in the mornings, the whole place feels sealed off from the rest of the world. As children, we were told not to wander into the forest after sunset during Obon. The spirits return home during that time, my grandmother would say. If you cross paths with one, don't look at its face. I never believed her. The first sign something was wrong came during festival preparations. Behind the shrine, near the stone steps, stands a small wooden board where villagers write wishes on Emma plaques. Most were ordinary: health, exam success, safe travels. But one plaque caught my attention. It had my name on it. Not just my family name, my full name, written carefully. The handwriting wasn't familiar. The wish read, "Let him remember this time." I assumed it was a joke from one of my cousins. When I asked around, everyone looked confused. No one admitted to writing it. That night, we lit hundreds of paper lanterns along the river. Their reflections trembled on the surface, stretching into thin, wavering lines. The air felt heavy, charged. During the ceremony, we were instructed to bow twice, clap twice, bow once. The rhythm echoed softly through the valley. When I raised my head after bowing, I noticed someone standing at the edge of the trees. A figure in a white yukata, completely still. I nudged my cousin. "Who's that?" He squinted. "Where?" By the time I looked again, the figure was gone. Later, as we carried the Mikashi through the narrow streets, I felt it again, that sensation of being watched. Not from a distance, but from somewhere close, just behind my shoulder. Each time I turned, there was no one. That night, I slept in my aunt's old tatami room. The window was open slightly, letting in cool mountain air and the faint scent of incense from the shrine. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of faint chanting. It drifted through the window, soft and rhythmic. At first, I thought it was leftover festival noise. But the chant didn't match any song I knew. It was slower, older. I checked my phone. 2 a.m. The chanting continued. Curious, I stepped outside. The village was dark. Lanterns extinguished. Houses silent. Yet the chanting persisted, coming from the direction of the shrine. I followed the narrow path up the stone steps. The shrine grounds were empty.
No lanterns, no priests.
But the sound surrounded me, as if rising from the earth itself. Then I noticed something strange. Fresh footprints in the gravel. Bare feet.
Dozens of them.
All leading toward the forest path behind the shrine. I shouldn't have followed. But something pulled at me, not physically, just a persistent sense that I was late for something important. The forest swallowed the moonlight quickly. The path narrowed, branches brushing against my shoulders. The footprints continued, overlapping, as though a crowd had passed through. The chanting grew clearer, and then I understood. The voices sounded like the villagers. My aunt's voice. My cousin's. Even my own. Soft, layered together, repeating something I couldn't quite make out. The path opened into a small clearing I didn't remember from childhood. In the center stood a tall wooden frame, like the base of a bonfire. Paper lanterns hung from it, glowing faintly without flame. And beneath them stood the villagers. All of them, facing inward, their backs to me, completely still. I felt a wave of relief. So this was some late-night ritual I'd forgotten. "Hey," I called softly. No one responded. The chanting stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt unnatural. One by one, their heads tilted slightly, as if listening, but none of them turned around. I took a hesitant step forward. The ground felt damp, though it hadn't rained. "Obachan." I tried, though my grandmother hasn't been alive for years. At the sound of my voice, every head turned at once. Not their bodies, just their heads, rotating far enough that their faces should have been visible. But the lantern light didn't illuminate features. Their faces were smooth, shadowed, indistinct, like masks without details. My breath caught in my throat. In the center of the circle stood another figure, wearing my clothes, standing exactly as I was. It turned fully toward me. Its face was clear, perfectly detailed, down to the small scar on my chin. It smiled gently and began to chant alone. Let him remember this time. The words echoed through the clearing. The faceless villagers joined in. I stepped backward, shaking my head. This isn't funny. My double took one step forward. The villagers' bodies began to turn now, slowly, joints moving stiffly. The lanterns brightened, casting long shadows that stretched toward me like reaching hands. I ran. Branches tore at my sleeves as I forced my way back down the path. The chanting followed, steady and calm, never rising in volume, yet never fading. When I burst back into the shrine grounds, the forest fell silent. The village below looked peaceful, dark and still. I hurried home and locked the door behind me. Morning came as usual. Sunlight through paper screens. Birds in the eaves. My aunt was already making breakfast. "You went out last night?" she asked casually. "How did you know?" She smiled faintly.
We saw you.
My stomach tightened. "At the shrine?" "In the forest," she corrected gently. She set down a bowl of miso soup in front of me. "You shouldn't wander during Oban. It's easy to lose your way." I wanted to argue, to tell her what I'd seen, but something felt wrong. Her face. The details seemed slightly blurred, like I couldn't quite focus on her eyes. I blinked. It returned to normal. Later, while washing my face, I looked into the bathroom mirror. For a moment, my reflection didn't move. It stood still, watching me. Its lips curved into a small, patient smile. Behind it, faintly, I saw lantern light, and a circle of figures waiting in the dark forest. I haven't left Hashikawa yet. The festival ends tonight. They keep telling me how important it is that I stay until the closing ceremony. After all, they say, it's my turn to stand in the center. The apartment across from mine has been empty for as long as I've lived here. At least, that's what the landlord told me when I moved into the building in Itabashi last spring. Unit 305, directly opposite my door, had water damage years ago.
No one wanted it after that.
I didn't question it. Tokyo has plenty of empty rooms people avoid for one reason or another. The hallway on our floor is narrow and always smells faintly of detergent. There are only 4 units, 2 on each side. Mine is at the end, near the emergency stairs. 305 is directly across. For months, nothing seemed unusual. Then one night, coming home late from work, I noticed light spilling from beneath 305's door. It was a thin, pale line against the dark hallway. I stopped walking. The landlord had been very clear. No electricity to that unit. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at that strip of light. Finally, I told myself the wiring must still be connected. Maybe someone was inspecting it. As I unlocked my door, I felt it. That subtle awareness of being watched. The kind you get in a crowded train when someone's staring too long. I glanced at the peephole of 305. There was no shadow behind it. No sound. I went inside and locked my door. The next morning, the light was gone. I called the landlord that afternoon, pretending to ask about mail delivery. Casually, I mentioned I'd seen light in 305. He laughed lightly.
Impossible.
Breaker's off. No one has the key. I didn't push further. That night, at exactly 11:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. Not a loud buzz, just a soft, single chime. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the intercom screen.
Static.
No image. "Hello," I said. No response. After a few seconds, I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but 305's door was slightly ajar. Just a few centimeters. A thin line of darkness visible through the gap. My heart pounded. It hadn't been opened before. I told myself someone from management must have forgotten to close it properly. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the open door was deliberate, like an invitation. I stepped closer. The air near the doorway felt cooler. There was a faint smell, stale water, and something metallic. I knocked gently on the door frame. No answer. I pushed the door open a little wider. The apartment inside was dark, but not empty. Furniture stood covered in white sheets. A low table. A standing lamp. The shapes were barely visible in the faint hallway light. The curtains were drawn tightly. The silence felt thick. I took one step inside. The floor creaked under my weight. Immediately, the door behind me clicked shut. I spun around. The hallway light vanished as the door sealed completely. Total darkness. My breathing sounded too loud. I fumbled for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through dust-filled air. The sheets covering the furniture were slightly damp, clinging to the shapes beneath. Water stains spread across the ceiling. But what caught my attention was the far wall. There was a mirror mounted there.
Large.
Rectangular. Facing the entrance. In the reflection, I could see myself standing in the center of the room. And, behind me, the door to 305 was open. Bright hallway light pouring in. I turned around. The door was closed. When I faced the mirror again, the reflected door was still open, and someone stood in the hallway, just outside. Their face was obscured by the angle, but they were standing directly where my apartment door would be, watching. My stomach twisted. Slowly, the figure in the reflection stepped forward, not into 305, into my apartment. I whipped around again. Darkness. Silence. The beam of my flashlight trembled in my hand. In the mirror, the figure had moved further inside my apartment's reflection. I could see the edge of my kitchen counter. The person moved exactly as I would if I were walking through my own home.
Familiar.
Casual. They paused near where my bedroom should be. Then they turned their head and looked directly at me through the mirror. Their face was mine. Not distorted. Not shadowed. Completely clear. Except for one detail. They were smiling. I staggered backward. The flashlight flickered. When the beam steadied, the mirror reflected only the dark room behind me. No open door. No double.
Just me.
I rushed to the entrance and yanked the door open. The hallway light flooded in. 305 looked abandoned again. Silent. I stepped out and shut the door behind me, half expecting it to resist. It closed easily. Back in my apartment, everything looked normal. My kitchen. My table. My bed. Nothing out of place. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I checked the hallway. 305's door was firmly closed. I tried the handle.
Locked.
I told myself it had been stress, overwork, imagination. Until yesterday. I came home earlier than usual. As I stepped off the elevator, I froze. My apartment door was open. Just slightly. I am certain I locked it that morning. From inside, I could hear faint movement. Not loud. Just subtle shifting. Like someone walking slowly across a familiar floor. I approached carefully. The nameplate beside my door no longer read 306. It read 305. Across the hall, the opposite door now displayed 306. My name was printed neatly beneath it. The light beneath that door was on. And as I stood there, confused and cold, my own voice drifted softly from inside my apartment, speaking to someone, welcoming them home. I started using the Yamanote line at night because it was the only time it felt empty. During the day, it's suffocating, shoulders pressed together, everyone staring at their phones. But after midnight, the carriages thin out. You can sit alone and watch your reflection in the darkened windows as the train loops endlessly around Tokyo. That's how I noticed the extra station. It was subtle at first. Between Shinjuku and Shinokubo, the train sometimes slows briefly to adjust timing. One night, as we decelerated, I glanced out the window and saw a platform I didn't recognize. It was fully lit. White tiles.
Clean. Modern.
A sign hung from the ceiling. I only caught the first two characters before we moved again. You. Then it was gone. I assumed it was a maintenance platform or a siding I'd never paid attention to. But the next night, it happened again. The train slowed in the same stretch of track. The same platform appeared. This time I pressed closer to the window. The sign read, Yugen-eki, Yugen Station. I frowned. There is no Yugen Station on the Yamanote line. I pulled up the route map on my phone. Every stop listed clearly. Noihin. When I looked up again, the platform had vanished into darkness. The third time, the train stopped. Not fully, just long enough that the doors chimed, though they didn't open. The platform was directly outside.
Bright.
Empty, except for one person. A man stood near the center of the platform, wearing a dark suit. He faced the train, but kept his head lowered. No one else in the carriage seemed to notice. A girl beside me continued scrolling on her phone. An older man dozed with his head against the window. The suited man slowly raised his head.
He was looking directly at me.
Not scanning the carriage. Not staring generally. At me. The train jerked forward, and the platform slid away. I told myself it was fatigue, but that night, I dreamed of standing on that platform alone. The lights above hummed faintly. The tiled floor stretched endlessly in both directions, with no stairs, no exits. Just tracks disappearing into black tunnels. When I woke, my phone alarm displayed a notification. Arriving Yugen. It vanished before I could tap it. The following evening, I stayed alert as we approached that stretch between Shinjuku and Shinokubo. Right on schedule, the train slowed. The platform appeared. And this time, the doors opened. No announcement played. The carriage remained silent. The platform outside looked normal, clean, sterile. The station sign clearly read Oshenyi in crisp black lettering. No one moved. It felt like the pause stretched longer than usual. Then, without thinking, I stood. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or the strange certainty that this was meant for me. I stepped onto the platform. The air felt cooler. The moment my shoes touched the tiles, the doors slid shut behind me. The train pulled away smoothly. I turned, expecting to see other passengers staring out the windows. But the windows were dark, reflective, showing only the platform.
And me.
Alone. The lights overhead buzzed faintly. The station was impossibly quiet. There were no ticket gates.
No vendi no machines. No maps.
Just a single signboard displaying the station name. I walked toward where stairs should have been. There were none. The platform extended farther than seemed possible, fading gradually into shadow. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Measured.
Calm.
I turned. The suited man stood a few meters away. Closer than before. I was wondering when you'd get off, he said. His voice was gentle, almost polite. Where is this? I asked. He tilted his head slightly. You pass it every day. I took a step back. There's no station here. He smiled faintly. There is now. The lights above flickered once. When they steadied, the platform was no longer empty. People stood scattered along its length.
Dozens of them.
All facing the tracks. All motionless. Their clothes were ordinary, office workers, students, elderly passengers. None of them spoke. None of them blinked. I felt a creeping recognition. I had seen some of these faces before. On the train. Late at night. Sitting quietly in the corners of carriages. The suited man gestured toward the tracks. Another train approached silently. Its windows were completely dark. No, I said instinctively. You don't have to rush, he replied calmly. The line loops forever. The train stopped. Its doors opened. Inside, every seat was occupied. The passengers sat upright, hands folded neatly, eyes forward. Except for one empty seat near the door. The suited man looked at me expectantly. A strange thought surfaced in my mind. If I boarded, someone on the regular Yamanote line would see this platform from their window. They would notice the extra station. They would see me standing here, waiting. I stepped back instead. I want to go home. The suited man's smile didn't fade. You are home. The lights flickered again. For a brief second, the platform went dark. In that instant, I felt something brush past me, close enough that I sensed warmth. When the lights returned, I was alone. The platform was empty. The train was gone. And I was sitting in my usual seat on the Yamanote line. The carriage hummed softly around me. Passengers swayed with the motion. My phone vibrated. A notification from the train app. Next stop, Shinokubo. I looked around quickly. Everything felt normal. Too normal. As we slowed between stations, I stared out the window. There was no platform, only darkness. But in the reflection of the glass, I saw it clearly. Behind me, through the train doors, a bright white station stretched endlessly, filled with silent passengers, and one empty seat, waiting. I grew up in a village, so small it didn't have a convenience store. The train only came once an hour, and after 9 p.m. the station was just a concrete platform and a flickering vending machine humming to itself. When I was in middle school, most of my classmates left for the city. By the time I turned 28 and moved back to care for my mother, half the houses on our street were empty. At the edge of the village, beyond the rice fields, there's an old Shinto shrine called Hashigami Shrine. No one knows when it was built. It isn't on most maps. The torii gate leans forward like it's bowing too deeply, and the Shimenawa rope is always freshly replaced, even though the priest died years ago. As children, we were told not to go there after sunset. Not because of ghosts, because of the listener. That's what my grandmother called it. She never said what it was, only that it listens when you speak your wish aloud at the shrine. And if you visit twice in one night, it will follow you home. I thought it was just another village superstition, like the faceless woman at the riverbank or the fox spirits that steal your voice. When I moved back, I hadn't thought about Hashigami Shrine in years. Then my mother started talking in her sleep.
At first it was soft mumbling.
Then full sentences. "I didn't mean it," she would whisper. "Please don't come inside." She had early-stage dementia, the doctor said. Night terrors weren't unusual. Still, one night I heard her bedroom door slide open. I found her standing in the Genkan, staring at the front door. "It's waiting," she told me. There was no one outside, just the quiet road and the cicadas screaming in the trees. The next morning, I noticed something strange. On the wooden step outside our front door, there was a small pile of white rice, neatly arranged, like an offering. We hadn't placed it there. I told myself it was an animal, a prank, but the rice appeared again the following night, and the next, always in the same spot. On the 4th day, I went to Hashigami Shrine for the first time since childhood. The path was narrower than I remembered, swallowed by weeds. The stone fox statues were chipped and moss-covered, their faces worn blank. The offering box was splintered, but inside it I saw fresh coins. Someone was still coming here. I stood before the main hall and clapped twice, the sound sharp in the heavy air. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to prove I wasn't afraid. "I just want her to sleep peacefully," I said aloud. The forest felt very still. On my way back, I noticed something odd. The path behind me seemed longer than before. I could still see the torii gate, but it looked smaller, further away than it should have been. That night, my mother slept without speaking, and the rice at our door stopped appearing. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt watched. It began subtly. The bathroom mirror would fog even when no one had showered. The television would flicker to static at exactly 3:17 a.m. Our old landline phone, disconnected for years, rang once, then fell silent. I started having dreams of the shrine. In them, I stood before the offering box, but I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't clap. I couldn't pray. I could only listen. There was breathing behind me. Not close enough to feel, just close enough to hear. Slow, patient. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, my mother spoke clearly for the first time in weeks. "You went twice," she said. I froze. "What?" "To the shrine. You went twice." I hadn't. At least I didn't think I had. Then I remembered something small. The day after I prayed, I'd realized I left my phone on the shrine steps. I'd gone back just before sunset to retrieve it. I hadn't prayed again. I hadn't said anything, but I had passed through the Torii gate a second time. That night, the rice returned. Not outside the door. Inside. A small white mound on the tatami floor beside my futon. I didn't sleep. Around 3:17 a.m., I heard it for the first time. A sound like someone drawing a long, slow breath through their teeth. It came from a hallway. Our house is old. The wood creaks. Pipes rattle. I know every sound it makes. This was different. It was deliberate. I told myself it was the wind. Then I heard it again, closer. Breathing. I lay there, eyes open in the dark, staring at the doorway. The fusama was slightly ajar. Beyond it, the hallway was black. Something shifted in that darkness. Not a shape, more like a density, as if the air itself thickened. I wanted to call out, to tell it to leave, but I remembered my grandmother's words. It listens when you speak your wish aloud. My throat felt tight. I stayed silent. The breathing continued for what felt like hours. Then it stopped. In the morning, my mother was gone. The front door was open. Her shoes were missing. We found her at Hashigami Shrine before noon. She was kneeling before the offering box, hands resting in her lap. Her eyes were open, but unfocused. She was alive, just empty. When the doctor asked her name, she didn't answer. When I asked if she remembered me, she only said one thing. It followed you home. We brought her back, but she hasn't spoken since. I've considered leaving the village, selling the house, but something keeps me here. Every night at 3:17, the television flickers. The landline rings once. And from the hallway, I hear that slow, patient breathing. It never enters my room. It just waits. Last week, I found rice in my coat pocket. I hadn't been to the shrine in months. At least, I don't remember going. But yesterday, when I checked my phone's photo gallery, there was a picture I don't recall taking. It's the Torii gate of Hashigami Shrine, taken at dusk. From the other side. In my hometown in Nagano, there's a tunnel everyone avoids after sunset. It cuts through the mountain between our village and the next town over. Before it was built, people used a narrow forest path that took over an hour to cross. The tunnel shortened that to 5 minutes by car. It should have made life easier. Instead, it emptied the village. Drivers began complaining about delays. They would enter the tunnel and emerge on the other side with more time passed than expected. 10 minutes. Sometimes 30. A few claimed their dashboard clocks reset entirely. The town office blamed faulty car electronics. Poor reception. Imagination. But fewer and fewer people used the tunnel at night. When my mother called to say she was moving into assisted living, I had to return to help pack. I hadn't been back in 8 years. On my second evening there, I borrowed her K car to pick up groceries from the neighboring town. The sun was already dipping behind the mountains when I approached the tunnel entrance. It looked smaller than I remembered. Concrete walls stained dark with moisture. Old sodium lights casting a dull orange glow inside. There was no other road unless I wanted to take the long forest route. I checked the time on the dashboard. 6:42 p.m. Then I drove in. The tunnel swallowed the last of the daylight behind me. Inside, the air always feels different, heavier somehow. The lights overhead flicker slightly as you pass beneath them, creating a subtle rhythm. About halfway through, I noticed something odd. The radio, which had been playing softly, lost signal. Not static, just silence. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 6:42 p.m. It hadn't changed. I frowned. I was certain at least a minute had passed. The tunnel seemed longer than usual. The exit light ahead looked distant, dim. I pressed the accelerator slightly. The engine responded, but the scenery didn't change. The same wall stains. The same cracked section of concrete on the right. As if I wasn't moving at all. My pulse quickened. I checked the rearview mirror. The entrance behind me was gone. Only more tunnel. The overhead lights flickered in unison. For a brief second, everything went dark. When the lights returned, there was a pedestrian walkway along the left side of the tunnel. There had never been one before, and someone was walking on it. A woman in simple, outdated clothing, long skirt, pale blouse. Her hair hung loose down her back. She walked in the same direction as my car, calm and unhurried. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection, but as I drove, she remained beside me, matching my speed perfectly. Her face was turned away. I tried honking. The sound felt muffled, swallowed by the tunnel walls. She didn't react. The dashboard clock still read 6:42. My breathing grew shallow. I pressed the accelerator harder. The engine whined. The tunnel did not change. The woman slowly turned her head. Not her body, just her head. Her face was pale and expressionless, eyes unfocused. She wasn't looking at the road ahead. She was looking directly at me. Then she smiled, not wide, just enough to show recognition. The overhead lights flickered again. When they steadied, the walkway was gone. The woman was gone, and the tunnel exit was suddenly right in front of me. I burst out into evening light, gasping. The sky was darker than it should have been. I checked the dashboard clock. 6:43 p.m. Relief washed over me. Maybe it had only been a minute after all. When I reached the grocery store, the parking lot was nearly empty. Inside, the cashier stared at me strangely.
"We're closing," she said.
I glanced at the wall clock behind her. 8:17 p.m. I felt a cold sensation crawl up my spine. "That's not possible," I said. It was just before 7. She gave me a polite, uncomfortable smile. "It's been after 8 for a while." I rushed back to the car. The dashboard clock still read 6:43. The sky outside was fully dark now. I drove back toward the tunnel, heart pounding. The entrance looked normal. Still, silent. I hesitated only a second before entering. The interior lights hummed overhead. Halfway through, the radio cut out again. The dashboard clock remained frozen. 6:43. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I kept my eyes forward this time. I didn't look at the sidewalls, didn't check the mirrors. Then, out of the corner of my vision, I saw movement. The pedestrian walkway was back. And this time, there were 2 figures walking. The same woman, and someone beside her.
A man.
He wore modern clothes. A jacket I recognized. My jacket. He walked with a slight limp in his right leg. I've had that limp since high school. They moved calmly along the walkway, keeping pace with my car. The man's head slowly turned. It was my face. Blank. Unblinking. He raised his hand slightly, as if signaling me to slow down. I stared straight ahead, heart hammering. The tunnel exit glowed faintly in the distance. The figures began to drift closer to the road, their feet not quite touching the ground. The overhead lights flickered. In that brief darkness, I felt certain something was in the passenger seat, close enough that I could sense warmth. The lights returned. The seat was empty. The walkway was gone. I shot out of the tunnel into the village night. My mother was waiting outside the house when I pulled in. "You're late," she said softly. "How late?" She looked confused. "It's morning." The sky above the mountains was pale blue. Birds were already calling from the trees. I checked the dashboard clock one last time. 6:43 p.m. It hasn't changed since. Even now, parked outside my apartment in Tokyo, the display glows steadily. 6:43. Sometimes, when I sit in the driver's seat, I hear the faint hum of tunnel lights. And if I look in the rearview mirror for too long, I can see a narrow pedestrian walkway stretching behind me, with 2 figures walking calmly toward the car, waiting for me to enter again. In the countryside where I grew up in Gifu, every house has a small storage shed. They're usually for tools, fertilizer, old festival decorations, things you don't need often but can't throw away. Ours stood behind the main house, near the edge of a small bamboo grove. When I was a child, my grandfather kept it locked. He told me the key had been lost long ago. After he moved into a care home last winter, my parents asked me to clear out the property so it could be sold. I hadn't lived there in over a decade. The shed was still there, weathered wood, corrugated metal roof humming softly in the wind. The lock was new, That was the first thing that felt wrong. I asked my mother about it. She frowned. Your grandfather must have replaced it.
Why?
I thought he lost the key. She didn't answer directly. He got forgetful near the end. Sometimes he'd go outside at night. That evening, I found the key in the kitchen drawer. It was labeled with a small strip of tape, not with a word, just a single drawn in black ink. I don't know why that unsettled me. The next morning, I walked out to the shed. The bamboo behind it rustled, though there was no wind. The new lock opened smoothly. Inside, it was darker than it should have been.
No windows.
Just thin beams of light slipping through cracks in the wood. The air smelled faintly sweet, like old incense. There were no tools.
No boxes. No clutter.
The shed was almost completely empty, except for a large wooden wardrobe placed against the far wall. It didn't belong there. It looked older than the shed itself. Dark lacquered wood, brass handles dulled with age. I stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under my weight. The wardrobe doors were slightly ajar, just enough to suggest someone had closed them carelessly. I told myself it was probably filled with old clothes. Family heirlooms. I reached for the handles. They felt colder than the surrounding air. I pulled the doors open. Inside was another door, not part of the wardrobe structure. An actual sliding door set into the back panel. It looked like a fusuma, paper surface stretched over a wooden frame. But the paper wasn't translucent. It was thick, opaque, and faintly stained. My chest tightened. There was no logical reason for a door to be inside a wardrobe inside a shed. I slid it open slightly. Darkness beyond. Not the darkness of a small compartment. Something deeper. The air that drifted out felt cool and damp, like the inside of a cave. I told myself the shed must connect to some kind of storage cellar. Old houses sometimes have those. Still, I didn't step through. Instead, I closed the inner door and shut the wardrobe. That night, I dreamed of the shed. In the dream, the wardrobe stood in my childhood bedroom instead of outside. Its doors were wide open. The inner sliding door was too. And from within, I could hear soft breathing. Slow, patient. I woke up before dawn, heart racing. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. Then I heard it. A faint sliding sound. Wood against wood. Coming from outside. I lay still. The sound came again. Not from the bamboo grove.
From the yard.
I forced myself to look out the window. The shed door was open. I was certain I had locked it. The morning light barely reached inside, but I could see the wardrobe clearly. Its doors stood open. The inner sliding door was closed. As I watched, it shifted slightly. Not fully. Just a few centimeters. As if someone inside had adjusted it. I didn't go back to sleep. When the sun rose fully, I walked to the shed again. The outer door was closed now.
Locked.
The new padlock secure. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, the wardrobe stood against the wall. Its doors closed neatly. I stepped closer. On the dusty floorboards in front of it were footprints. Bare feet. Small. Child-sized. They led from the wardrobe to the shed entrance.
And stopped there.
I stared at them for a long time. I have no younger siblings. No children in the family. I told my mother we needed to remove the wardrobe before selling the property. She went pale. Your grandfather told us never to open that, she said quietly. You knew about it? She nodded. It was already there when he bought the house. Why didn't you get rid of it? She hesitated. He said it wasn't empty. I laughed nervously. It clearly is. She looked toward the backyard. He said it leads somewhere. That night, I couldn't resist. I brought a flashlight, unlocked the shed, opened the wardrobe. The inner sliding door was slightly ajar.
I don't remember leaving it that way.
I slid it fully open. The beam of my flashlight cut through darkness. It illuminated wooden flooring stretching forward. A narrow hallway. The walls were the same wood as our house. Family photos hung along them. Photos I recognized. My parents' wedding. My elementary school entrance ceremony. But the frames were old, aged far beyond their actual years. I stepped inside before I could stop myself. The air grew colder behind me. The hallway extended farther than the dimensions of a shed allowed. At the end stood a familiar door, my childhood bedroom. I approached slowly. The door was slightly open. Inside, I saw a small figure sitting on the floor,
Back turned to me.
a child wearing the pajamas I used to wear. He was facing the wardrobe, as if waiting. I felt dizzy. The child tilted his head slightly. Then he spoke. Grandpa said I have to stay here. My throat went dry.
Why?
I managed. So you can leave. The hallway lights flickered. I took a step back. The walls creaked softly, like wood under pressure. The child began to stand. Slowly, I stumbled backward through the sliding door and slammed it shut. The wardrobe doors rattled violently for a few seconds, then went still. I locked the shed and haven't opened it since. We decided not to sell the house. No one mentioned the wardrobe again. Last week, my mother called me. She sounded tired. He's been going outside at night, she said.
Who?
There was a long pause. Then, very quietly, you. There's a vending machine at the end of my street that wasn't there before. I'm sure of it. I've lived in this part of Osaka for 5 years. My apartment sits on a narrow residential road lined with small houses and low concrete walls. There's a convenience store on one end and a shuttered laundromat on the other. No vending machine. 2 weeks ago, I came home from work just after midnight and saw it glowing softly beside the laundromat. Bright white. Too bright for that quiet street. I stopped walking. It stood flush against the wall, humming faintly. The metal surface was spotless, almost reflective. Rows of drinks sat behind clear plastic panels. No brand logos. No prices. Just blank white labels.
I assumed it had been installed that day.
Japan has vending machines everywhere. It shouldn't have felt strange, but something about it was off. The light it emitted didn't spill naturally onto the pavement. It felt contained, as if the glow ended abruptly a few centimeters from the machine. I approached cautiously. The selection buttons were blank circles. Above the coin slot was an empty rectangular panel where instructions should have been. No text. No images. Just smooth white. I felt oddly thirsty. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a 100 yen coin. As I brought it closer, the slot widened slightly. Not mechanically.
It softened.
Like something adjusting. I hesitated. Then I stepped back. This was ridiculous. I was tired. Overthinking. I walked home. The next morning, the vending machine was still there. In daylight, it looked almost normal. A few neighbors passed it without a glance. I stopped an elderly man walking his dog. Did they install this recently? I asked. He looked at the machine, then at me. It's always been there, he said. His tone was polite, but there was confusion in his eyes. I didn't argue. That night, I dreamed about it. In the dream, the street was empty and silent. The vending machine was the only source of light. Every button glowed faintly. One of them pulsed slowly, waiting. When I woke up, my throat was dry. I tried to ignore the machine for the next few days. But every time I passed it, one button seemed slightly brighter than the others. Always in a different position. Always drawing my eye. Last Friday, after a long shift, I stopped in front of it again. The street was deserted. The machine hummed softly. The bright button pulsed once. I don't know why I gave in. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself it was normal. I inserted a coin. This time, the slot felt solid. The coin disappeared with a muted sound. The glowing button brightened. I pressed it. There was no mechanical whir. No clunk of a bottle dropping. Instead, the entire machine went silent. The lights flickered off. For a moment, the street was completely dark. Then, the machine lit up again. One of the compartments was open. Inside was not a drink. It was a small rectangular mirror. Perfectly clean. I stared at my reflection. It looked normal. Tired. Pale under the harsh, white glow. I reached in and took the mirror. The surface felt warm. Behind me, the vending machine's lights dimmed slightly. When I looked back at it, the rows were empty.
No drinks.
Just hollow spaces. The hum resumed, softer now. I went home and set the mirror on my kitchen table. I don't know why I kept it. Curiosity, maybe. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up needing water. As I stepped into the kitchen, I saw light flickering. The mirror was glowing faintly. I approached slowly. In the reflection, I wasn't standing in my kitchen. I was outside, on the street, in front of the vending machine. The reflected version of me stood perfectly still, facing it. The vending machine in the reflection was brighter than it had ever been. Every button pulsed in unison. My reflection raised a hand, pressed one. I didn't move, but in the mirror, I saw the compartment open, and something stepped out. Not fully visible, just a shape emerging from where the drink should have been.
Tall.
Too tall. It leaned slightly toward my reflection. The reflection didn't step back. It simply stood there, watching. I dropped the mirror. It didn't shatter. It landed face up on the floor. The reflection now showed only my dark kitchen ceiling. No street. No machine. The next morning, the vending machine was gone. The wall beside the laundromat was bare concrete again. Asked the convenience store clerk if she knew what happened to it. "What vending machine?" she asked. I didn't push. I went back to my apartment. The mirror was still on the kitchen floor where I'd dropped it. When I picked it up, my reflection looked normal. Until I blinked. In that fraction of a second, I saw it. Behind me, standing in my kitchen.
Tall.
Featureless. Waiting. When I turned around, the room was empty. The mirror feels heavier now. Sometimes, when I pass by it, I hear a faint humming. And when I look closely at its surface, I can see rows behind me, neatly arranged, like empty compartments, as if something is waiting for the next selection. And that's where tonight's story fades away. If you're still listening, I hope it helped your mind slow down. Leave a small comment so I know you made it to the end. I'll be here again tomorrow night with another story waiting in the dark. Sleep peacefully.